Molly House is the new hotness, designed by Joe Kelly, co-designed by Cole Worley, and kindly provided to us by publisher Whirligig Games. In it, players take the role of a queer person in 18th century London looking to grow joy in their community by throwing really fabulous parties, represented here by playing cards into a central pot. The deck consists of 4 suits corresponding to the 4 Molly houses on the board, with each suit having desires ranked 1 through 9, 2 Mollys represented by the Jack and the Queen, and 2 threats called Rogues and Constables. These threats are constantly on the lookout for Mollys having fun, and because of that, they're going to be a pain in your side frequently. You're gonna have to play around them, usually at parties. Festivities in this game are the primary way of scoring victory points, which represent the joy you've had so far. At the start of a party, the community plays a random card from the deck, then whoever brought the party to order must play a card. Every other player gets to decide if they are going to add a card to be potentially scored, or pass on this party entirely, reserving the cards in their hand for future festivities. After 2 rounds of this, including another random card from the community, the party runner must choose 4 of the cards played to score, based on an easy-to-understand ranking system. Any card that was chosen as part of the winning hand is scored, going to the person who played its reputation and gaining them joy equal to the stars on the card. Any card not chosen goes to the gossip pile, which is bad. Any card in the gossip pile at the end of the week, which is represented by the cards and the deck running out, gets shuffled together, and a third of those gets moved away to safety. The others get revealed. Any revealed Mollies, threats, and desires get multiplied together, and that ends up being evidence counted against that suit's Molly house. If a Molly house gets too much evidence against it, it gets shut down. At that time, whoever has the most reputation at that specific Molly house gets an accusation thrown against them, which can be something as minor as losing some victory points, or it can be something as major as getting hanged at the end of the game. Now, none of the other players know what you have drawn when you get that accusation, so you have to make a choice at that point. Once you've received an accusation, you can place an encounter token on one of the 4 Molly houses on the board. This token can be proclaiming their loyalty to the house, which will score them points if it's still open at the end of the game, or it can be betraying the house and hoping for its downfall. If you place your informer token on a house, you now have a new way of winning. If all 4 houses are shut down, or if one house is going to be shut down a second time, the game ends with every player losing. That is, unless you've snitched on a house that has closed. At that point, you go into a completely different in-game scoring with just yourself and the other players who have successfully snitched, betraying the community you started out the game rooting for. All but one of the 6 actions in this game are, in my mind, related to throwing parties, either adding cards into your hand or positioning yourself to throw a better party once it gets to your turn. And the reason I'm saying this is to just explain that the festivities are the meat of the game. They are the primary way you score points, and they are the primary way that things happen on the board. And I didn't quite understand this the first time I played. Me and my fellow players were very scared to throw parties the first few rounds because we saw them as a way to expose ourselves to gossip and threats and get these Molly houses shut down. And then we realized the community joy wasn't really going up, so we couldn't get to the good ending of the game, and then we swung way too hard in the other direction through way too many parties, and because of that, one of the houses went from being opened to shut down and raided a second time, instantly ending the game before any of us had a chance to become an informer. And at the time, it was frustrating because we felt like this was the way that the game happened, but we didn't really have a way to control it. And in hindsight, that was the way it had to be. I've talked previously about the magic circle in this game, which is a concept that I've adapted from Rules of Play, which is basically my way of thinking about how am I feeling like the thing I'm playing as in a board game. And there's not a much clearer example than that. You're playing as a queer person in 18th century London trying to find the most joy you can in this existence. And you do that in this game by throwing these really great parties. And if you're too scared to do that, then you aren't going to get joy. But at the same time, you have to be careful because it was a dangerous time to be a queer person in London. And this game just represents that so well. I, on further plays, became much more mindful of throwing parties and making sure that I was throwing them as frequently as I could, but also making sure that I can muster up a good one without exposing myself to threats. This game does a great job of making you balance trying to gain joy while also making sure the community is happy and you're not being too reckless. At the same time, it really incentivizes considering whether or not it's worth it to sell out the molly houses. This game gets you into the headspace of the people you are playing as. In real life, as noted in the rulebook, molly houses historically were shut down by informers who were jealous ex-lovers or people just trying to save their own skin. This story is recreated through the gameplay. The more you play, the more you can see how these people came to the decisions that they did. When you start out the game, you're not going into it with the intention of selling out the molly houses, but after you get that first major accusation that says there's a chance you'll get hanged if the game ends peacefully, you're much more inclined to turn into an informer. Molly House has so many hooks to draw you into the world and characters that you're playing as. My favorite part of this game is that I could tell that all the other players at the table were facing the same dilemma that I was, which is, do you turn traitor or not? And then you have to decide who are you going to trust to throw a successful party and who's just going to start throwing in useless cards and threats to hopefully get them into the gossip pile. Now, while I clearly enjoy this game, there are a few things that I feel like I have to mention that were very detrimental to my enjoyment when I started playing. The colors of the different suits are too similar. Specifically, the green of fans and the blue of cups are really difficult to distinguish in less than ideal lighting. Also, player colors are really similar to the suit colors, even though they don't have any bearing on one another. I've found myself and fellow players moving joy counters of wrong players up because you get confused and you think, oh, well, I just scored 3 points using blue cards. Let me move up the blue scoring token. It's a bit silly, but it's happened enough that it seems like it would be easier to just differentiate the colors more. The teach is also a bit troublesome. I think I would do a better job at it now, but getting this game fresh out of the box and just knowing what I knew based on reading and watching previews, it was difficult to parse the rulebook in a way that was easy to understand, and it's difficult to find the flow of teaching the basic rules and then how festivities work and how does reputation affect the game and how does being an informer affect the game and what are the game end conditions. It was all just a bit overwhelming, and while I got there and after 3 or 4 times playing the game really clicked for me, it's going to be overwhelming for some players, and that might be a bit of a turnoff. And one step past that is there are a lot of little rules that are easy to forget, which led to me being face deep in the rulebook the first few times I played, which took me out of the fun. The game also requires you to start getting good at counting cards if you want to be successful. You can't discuss specific cards in hand, so you have to have a good idea of where the threats are and how many of each suit are being added to the gossip pile, or else you might see a molly house get raided twice, instantly ending the game at week's end. Some players are going to find this rewarding, and they should because it is a main mechanic of the game, but I fear there are going to be people who will think that this is just too much to keep track of. My biggest criticism though is that the solo mode is just kinda eh. It doesn't do a great job mimicking other players, and that's not necessarily a bad thing for a solo mode, but it doesn't really give you a good reason to play it over other solo games. What I love about Molly House is the interaction with other players and trying to gauge who is lying and who is going to help you keep the community joy up. The solo mode does provide some fun new mechanics to interact with in place of that, but it left me unfulfilled compared to playing it with other people. And the Rookery, which is the name for the solo mode, hates love. It is so difficult to achieve anything other than the infiltration ending in this mode that you almost have to set out with the intention of betraying the community from the start if you want a fair shot at being the Rookery, which feels like it goes against the game's premise. If you're looking to get this game solely for the solo mode, I think it's best to look elsewhere. Now is the time in the video where I'm going to talk about my biases. First of all, I hold Whirligig Games in pretty high regard, and just based on their previous publications, I trust them to publish a game that is fun. Did that mean I pushed through the friction that is starting to learn Molly House for longer than I would have if it was a game published by somebody else? Maybe? I'm not really sure, but more importantly, I'm a queer man, and to see this history and culture in this medium clicked for me in a way that meant I was going to push past any friction to find the fun. Molly House does a great job representing the queer culture of 18th century London. They have pages upon pages in the rulebook explaining the history and significance of the people, locations, and illustrations represented throughout this game. And because of that, I emotionally resonated with this game in a way that I can't guarantee everybody will. Pushing past my biases though, I can tell you Molly House is a good game. It might not be as mechanically deep as some of the other Whirligig publications, but it does give players many tools on their turn to make interesting choices. What cards are you going to play now versus save for your own festivity? Are you going to turn traitor or not? And if so, which house are you going to betray? This game is so thematically consistent within the historical context that it's set in. And now that I've played it enough times that I feel like I have the teach pretty down pat, and also I know the flow of the game, there isn't really friction to keep it from getting to the table for me. And because of that, I see myself enjoying and playing this for years to come. That was my review. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts on Molly House down in the comments below, and I would love to hear them. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being an awesome community. I am Eric with the Cardboard Herald.